So key things that we did feedback-wise from last time, one is contextualize the sources. Not everybody knows what the sources are, which is a really great piece of feedback. Another is go more slowly, which is also, of course, great. And another key piece of that, which Daryl and hey Sam, welcome.
Hey Drew.
Hey, and another key piece of feedback was to go, not to just like rush through things, but like to go more slowly. Part of that was feeling the time crunch of the 40-minute session that we had. So Daryl and also Stephanie stepped up and they said, hey, what if you pay for a little bit of a monthly subscription and then people chip in. So thank you. I'm going to thank you right off the bat, Daryl and Stephanie, for contributing a little bit of money to help make that happen. I'm not doing this to get money, okay? But if anybody wants to contribute, feel free to. All right, so we're going to get rolling. And I think one piece, so I'm going to record just because that was suggested to me. Also, people who aren't able to be here want to see it. But I'm going to do another piece of feedback, which was screen share. Right. All right, is this what's coming up? People see the sources?
Yep.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so, actually, you know what? Before we dive into the sources, I'm going to do one thing, which is take a really broad step backwards, which is, I'm going to put away, I'm going to put away these sources. Welcome, Jacob. I don't know who you are, Jacob, but welcome to this thing going on. I'm going to take a big step back. With A New Hope, if we had to get one theme, what would it be? What would be the overarching theme of the movie be? It's not complicated. This is not a trick question.
Redemption?
Like, how many times does the Imperial March appear in A New Hope? What's the key theme?
Hope.
Redemption?
Hope.
Being able to grow past yourself and realize you're more than what you think you started out being.
There's that, right? There's like that hero's journey piece of it, especially for Luke. I would say
not a farmer.
Someone said hope, right? Someone said hope. Yes. All right. I
thought
thought I
it was
heard it. I'm going to go with it. I think a big piece of it is hope, right? Especially, and as I mentioned, this appeared in the 70s when there was a lack of hope. And so this movie really came to bring it a lot of hope into things, as well as also this notion of a higher power, which we see actually really interestingly on both sides. We see it both with Darth Vader when he's responding to Admiral Mati, right? Was that the one who was saying like, your devotion to your sad, sick sorcerer's ways or whatever, and Vader says like,
was that in what's it called? That was a scene in Rogue One, right?
It's in A New Hope.
Oh,
yeah.
A New Hope, where I think it's Admiral Mati. And then Vader says, "Oh, well, like the power of your Death Star doesn't compare to the power of the Force, right?" And then we also see it both with Han Solo being super duper skeptical to this Force thing, as well as also old Ben telling Luke about the Force. So we see it really on both sides, both on the dark side, so to speak, and the light side, that there is this notion of hope and a larger and a broader like force going on in the galaxy. So, hey, Allison, welcome. Welcome. You were, by the way, you were not here for my trivia question, which was good that you weren't here because you know the answer, which is how many times does the Imperial March appear in A New Hope?
0?
That's right.
Woo! Okay, I'm allowed to stay.
I knew Allison would know the answer because she also listens to David W. Collins stuff. All right, so now that I discussed sort of the broad macro piece of A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back has a very different tone, and it doesn't go towards the hope inspiration and a larger, I mean, if you think about it, and still I'm staying on the macro before diving into the micro, if you think about it, we really only see the, hey, welcome. Okay, all right, gotta tone it down. All right, so what we really see is the Force is discussed by sort of old Ben as Force Ghost and also Yoda, but we don't really see Vader and the dark side mentioned, right? The Force doesn't really appear as much. So that's just something to think of. I'm curious to hear anybody's thoughts on sort of the broader themes of Empire Strikes Back. Okay. All right, let's go into screen sharing. All right, so this is a really interesting thing, especially the first two things here, which is honoring friends, but it's really about people's lives. So does anybody, I didn't do this last week, but since we're gonna take it a little bit more slowly this week, does anybody wanna read the dialogue here? Not that I can see everybody's hands. Anybody? Bueller?
I'll do it.
Great.
I'm pushed to the troops, a mounted Tauntaun. Deck officer. Your Tauntaun will flee before you reach the first marker, Han Solo. Now, see you in hell. Han maneuvers his mount out of the cave and races into the dark, bitter at night.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. So I'm sure people are familiar with the context of the scene, which is that no one's heard from Luke. And then Han says, like, what do you mean no one's heard? Like, he would check in. Like, he's someone who would like, pay attention to protocol, right? So basically Han goes out of his way, even though the context is that, like, Han's packing his stuff up. He's not part of the rebellion. And then, so he's really concerned for his friend. Does someone want to take this Pirkei Avot piece? And while people are thinking about raising their hands, I'm going to contextualize Pirkei Avot, which is that it is basically fully like edited or published in the early 3rd century, but it contains sayings of sages from not only the first couple centuries of the Common Era, but even centuries predating the Common Era. So this statement is Rabbi Eliezer, who's he's a significant sage in the latter part of the 1st century of the Common Era. Someone want to volunteer? Yep, Sam, go for it.
All right. Rabbi Eliezer said, let the honor of your friend be as dear as your own, and not be easily provoked to anger, and repent one day before your death.
So the piece that I'm picking out from this is may the honor of your friend be as dear to you as your own, which it's a really nice piece that Han's like going out of his way to then like help save he's concerned for his friend, right? So I'm gonna do one more and then we'll.
And brother-in-law.
What?
And brother-in-law. Future brother-in-law.
Future brother-in-law. All right, does someone want to take this this next scene where it says murder? Someone want to read it out? Not everybody jump if it's the Admiral Ozzel.
I'll go.
Go for it, Allison.
All right, Admiral Ozzel.
2 Allisons. Oh boy.
I'm with one L. Okay, or you can say Ellie's mother because I show up as Ellie. Okay, yes. So Admiral Ozzel, Lord Vader, the fleet has moved off light speed and we're preparing to. Darth Vader, you have failed me for the last time, Admiral. Captain Pitt steps forward as Admiral moves away, slightly confused, touching his throat as it begins to constrict painfully.
Awesome. All right. And actually, you know what? Do you want to just keep going, Allison? Just take the next 2?
Yeah, sure.
All
so, and it comes from Exodus, Shmos 20:13. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. And Pirkei Avot in chapter 1, Shemaiah used to say, love work, hate acting the superior, and do not attempt to draw near to the ruling authority.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Allison. And so I don't know who you are, Devorah. Welcome to the session. So we have very simply do not murder, right, in Exodus, and then also we have a very different, this is kind of a distant text, even though it's in Pirkei Avot, but the not coming close to the authority. I don't know if anybody, it's kind of like the hating sort of authority and also not coming close to the ruling authority, which I'm not trying to blame Admiral Ozzel for achieving admiralty, but this is definitely like just simply straight out wanton murder by Vader. And I think that and these are both really early on in the movie, right? This is still before the invasion of Hoth, where we clearly see Vader going out of his way to unnecessarily kill someone who he meant, like, he's planning for the invasion of Hoth, and like, sure, he made a tactical mistake, but like, you know, is it really worth just murdering an admiral for this? Whereas Han goes out of his way to save Luke's life, which is a really, it's a good, admirable move. Any thoughts, anybody? Any questions, comments, questions, queries, concerns? We can move on. Awesome. All right. So this is kind of, I think we brought this text up last week, but you know what? I'm taking this as kind of a separate thing from last week. Does someone want to take this, make a teacher for yourself piece? Yeah. Sam?
Is it the Obi-Wan piece?
Yeah, Force Ghost Obi-Wan. Yeah.
All right. You will go to the Dagobah system. Dagobah system? There you will learn from Yoda, the Jedi Master who once instructed me.
All right. Do you want to take that Pirkei Avot text?
All right. Joshua?
Yeah.
Joshua Ben Pirhia used to say, make a teacher for yourself, acquire a friend for yourself, and judge all men with the scale weighed in his favor.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you. So the reason I bring in this text from Pirkei Avot here is is making a teacher for yourself, right? It's almost like even though Luke is not necessarily going out of his way, at least initially, to make whoever this, you know, this sort of old, this Yoda, this Jedi Master, right? But that's what he needs to do. He needs to go and acquire this teacher for himself. Cool. All right. And speaking of Yoda, we're past Hoth now. What about treating people when meeting them? Anybody? Jacob or Devorah? We haven't heard from you yet. Do you want anybody?
I'll go.
Go for it, Jacob.
Treating people when meeting them. Yoda, I'm wondering why you're here. Looking for someone. Found someone you have, I would say. Shammai used to say, make your study of the Torah a fixed practice. Speak little, but do much, and receive everyone with a pleasant countenance.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacob. So here, I like, it's so funny with this movie. There were so many scenes that just Pirkei Avot screamed out to me, and not just because I really like Pirkei Avot. And Pirkei Avot is a text that really has it's really incomparable when it comes to rabbinic text. It's so chock full of wisdom and like really great proverbial sayings. So here it's the receive everyone with a pleasant countenance, which really stuck out to me, which, you know, in this initial encounter, you see Yoda and Luke, and Yoda is being incredibly humble, and Luke is saying, I'm looking for someone, and what's not on here, but Luke is very dismissive of Yoda. Oh, no, you can't help me. I'm looking for, you know, a great Jedi Master, and of course, you know what, that's going to lead us it's pretty much the same dialogue. Someone want to take the war's greatness? This is going to lead us down a rabbit hole. I'm just letting everybody know that in advance.
I can go here.
You can do it.
Great. Let's start with Daryl.
All right.
Help you I can, yes. I don't think so. I'm looking for a great warrior. A great warrior. Wars not make one great.
All right. Do we have another volunteer reader? Is that Jason?
I could read the next one.
Great.
The Pirkei Avos.
Yep.
4:1.
Yep.
Ben Zoma said, who is mighty, a warrior? He who subdues his evil inclination, as it is said, he that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that rules his spirit than he that takes a city.
All right. So I'm going to go in a tangent, but it will better help us understand what's going on here. So first of all, I want to give a big shout out right now to Vera. So Vera asked her husband, hey, are there any other relevant texts in Judaism when it comes to war, greatness? So first of all, thank you, Vera, for sending those over to me. And it's really hard, as Vera can attest, to find something that really talks about war and not making one great, right? Right. So I was trying to think, because in rabbinic stuff, even though the rabbis, that was not really part of their culture, they weren't really a warrior culture. They were kind of under the thumb of other sort of like governments and powers that be. So there wasn't this huge tradition, but at the same time, they didn't totally downplay it either. So people, if you have familiarity, if you've come into contact with Pirkei Avot, undoubtedly you'll come into this strange, it's the very first mission in the 4th chapter of Pirkei Avot, and it's a really strange collection of statements by Ben Zoma. There are actually 4 of them, and what appears are really things that I think societies tend to value. So they're wealth, wisdom, strength, and honor. Right, so there's 4 things, and Ben Zoma has, just like this setup, it's a tripartite sort of setup. He asks, who is such and such? He provides an answer that is not something that you would initially think. It's actually paradoxical to the question, and then he provides a scriptural proof text. So I'm going to go very tangential and take us far away from Star Wars. If you want to, I'm going to get on my soapbox right now, which is, the answers that Ben Zoma here provides are not really, like I said, they're paradoxical. So if anybody's familiar with this text, and if you're not familiar, if you have the link to the Safari thing, you can click to find out what the broader text is. But what's the answer for someone who's wealthy? What's the measure of wealth, according to Ben Zoma?
He who is happy with what he has.
Right? Someone who's happy with their portion, okay? What about someone who's honored? Who's someone who's an honored, respected person?
And it's someone who honors others.
That's right. And then what about Rich? What's the other one? Who's wise? Ezu Chacham. Who's wise?
Someone who learns from everyone.
Right. Now, what in all of these, it should be the exact opposite, right? One who is honored is someone who everybody honors, right? One who is wise is someone who everybody learns from, right? He's able to teach everybody something, right? And so you get, and the wealthy thing is funny also, because most people have a sense of like a vague gauge of wealth. And actually, as it turns out, elsewhere in the Babylonian Talmud, there's like 3 or 4 different rabbis who they have the exact same question: Ezehu Asher, who's wealthy? And it comes out to be that they all have these different gauges of wealth. You know, you have 100 servants, you have 100 fields, all this stuff. Here, Ben Zoma says, no, you're just happy. And the same thing is true here with the who's a mighty person, who's a strong person. Now we get to the scriptural. Now, with each of these 4 statements and the questions and answers, he then has a third part, which is a scriptural piece, which I'm not going to get into this part so much, except for this one, which is he takes it in a totally different direction. So here, in the Proverbs piece, it's better that you're slow to anger than the mighty, and it's better to be one who rules the spirit than one who conquers a city. Okay. But actually, the way that Ben Zoma understands it is that one who takes over a city is one who is mighty, which is like, like Ben Zoma's, by the way, if this is this really is an entire separate conversation of like what Ben Zoma is doing here in 4.1 with all 4 of these things and the interplay and the dynamics between the question answer and scriptural proof text. But he's being funny about it. Okay. So ultimately, what Ben Zoma is taking this Proverbs thing of saying someone who is able to take over a city, but basically it's like this Ben Zoma thing, right? It's really about your own inner strength. It's not about an external manifesting strength over others. Any questions on that? That was like my little rabbit hole there, my tangent. Any questions, anybody on that? Not only the wars make not one great and the Ben Zoma piece. People are good? All right. So speaking of patience, even though patience kind of just popped up in that Proverbs piece, we got a longer thing here. Patience is a funny thing. Who wants to read the script? Got a lot of volunteers. I'm happy to keep reading, but if you want to hear from someone other than, I'll read. If no one's jumping out, all right. So Luke says, "Oh, come on. How could you know my father? You don't even know who I am. Oh, I don't even know what I'm doing here. We're wasting our time." So Yoda says, "I can't teach him. The boy has no patience." So you can read the choreography. But then Forrest Ghost Ben says, "He will learn patience." Yoda, much anger in him, like his father. Forrest Ghost Ben, "Was I any different when you taught me?" Yoda, he is not ready. Luke, Yoda, I'm ready. Ben, I can be a Jedi. Ben, tell him I'm ready. So it's interesting when it comes to patience, and a lot of stuff when I was searching around for like what constitutes patience like in Judaism, right? And a lot of it is like not rushing to anger. It's like the inverse, even though here there is kind of a patience and anger interplay, but there is, we'll see, like I quoted a couple things here from the book of Proverbs about being slow to anger, but as far as like patience and like not rushing off to do stuff, it's not really something that's as much of a value. The amusing thing, actually, one of the articles I came across while Googling this, Rabbi Beryl Wine actually entitles his piece saying, "Patience is not a Jewish virtue," which is really also, it's kind of a paradoxical move, because there are some interesting sort of texts within certainly rabbinic Judaism about of whether it's Zrizin Makdimin Mitzvot, of those who are like sort of zealous, they go out and they go perform mitzvot, and also this rabbinic reading of the way that the Jews in the book of Exodus accepted the Torah at Mount Sinai, that this idea of Na'aseh v'nishma, like before, we don't even need to understand, let's just go ahead and do it, right? So there is, to some degree, it's an interesting interplay of like, is patience even a Jewish value, which I think Rabbi Beryl Wine brings, which is an interesting, I think, counter move than what we would necessarily expect. Yeah, Allison.
So that's interesting, because when you bring that to mind, and like especially, we just discussed like the whole war thing, like aren't we like taught when it comes to Jewish history though, like at the time when the Romans were sieging, is that even a word? Yeah. Jerusalem, like the zealots were the ones who were impatient, and they burnt down all the wheat and everything, so they were forced to go to war. Meanwhile, the rabbis were saying, no, we have to be patient, we can wait this out.
Right. I think it's one of these things that's just in constant, it's not a black and white thing.
Context.
Yeah, it is context. And also like specifically the zealots, when it comes to the destruction of the Second Temple, there's also like the political infighting and the various tactical moves that you can agree or disagree with. So it's not super clear. It's not super
okay.
clear. But that having been said, does anybody want to take these two Proverbs verses? Allison with an I.
Me?
Want to take Allison with an I?
Oh.
No? Yes? Ellie's mom?
Me, sure. Okay.
Yeah, Ellie's mom.
So patience results in much understanding. Impatience gets folly as its portion. A hot-tempered man provokes a quarrel. A patient man calms strife.
Awesome. Thank you, Ellie. Allison. So we have, so there is clearly, in the book of Proverbs, and there are other places, and the rabbinic literature, where being slow to anger, especially, and I could have gone with this other Pirkei Avot piece of there, I think it's the 5th chapter of Pirkei Avot, where it talks about there are 4 temperaments in people, that one who is slow to anger, one who is quick to anger, and all this stuff. So there's a lot with that interplay of, slow to anger, quick to anger, even in rabbinic literature. It's so, but as far as like patience, not within the context of anger, that's a little bit harder to find. As I mentioned, there are texts that go the opposite way. So it's not 100% like chill out, is 100% a Jewish value. It's way grayer than that. All right. But speaking of anger, all right. So you know what? Allison with a Y. Do you want to take it?
Sure.
All right.
Yoda. Run, yes. A Jedi's strength flows from the Force, but beware of the dark side. Anger, fear, aggression. The dark side of the Force are they? Easily they flow, quick to join you in a fight. If once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. Consume you it will, as it did Obi-Wan's apprentice. Luke. Vader. Is the dark side stronger? Yoda. No, no, no. Quicker, easier, more seductive. Luke. But how am I to know the good side from the bad? Yoda, you will know. When you are calm at peace, passive, a Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack.
Awesome. Thank you. So there is a lot to unpack here. I really focused here on the anger piece. We could also talk about fear, which is an interesting path to go down, especially within like rabbinic texts of like the value of fearing God. And also there's also a commandment to fear mother and father. So there's fearing parents and God is an interesting piece where fear actually is a good thing, but maybe not other people per se. And aggression, I don't know. I'm curious if people can tap into the aggression thing, but really I wanted to focus here on the anger, and also another piece, especially if someone wanted to do this for a different group or different classes, also to talk about the calm, at peace, passive aspect of those characteristics. If you are as somehow valuing them for Jedi piece, for Jedi values, I don't know how necessarily much that plays into Jewish conceptions of. I'm sure that you could probably find texts that go both ways on these. As it turns out, with anger, there are a lot of rabbinic texts, of which I definitely brought a handful here. So I'm going to read some of them unless anybody wants to step up and read them. But I'm just going to, so we have some interesting, like, it's clear that the rabbi, I'm going to give a meta introduction here with all these anger pieces, which is that it's clear that the rabbis are not fond of anger. They do not like it. They do not think it is a good thing. They do not forbid it. It's something that they recognize is there. It's in humans, and it's something that it's just not the best, right? So we see here in the Babylonian Talmud. So the Babylonian Talmud, just for some context here, it was probably like finally published, edited, even though it was all orally done. It was not written on paper, but probably early 6th century, or at least the latest maybe late 6th century. But we have Rabba bar Rav Huna, who I suspect is who lives probably in the 4th century in Persia, Babylonia. Rabba bar Rav Huna said, anyone who gets angry, even the divine presence is not important to him. And then there's a verse. And then we have Rabbi Yirmiyah of Difti, anyone who forgets his learning and increases foolishness. So anybody who gets angry. And then Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, anyone who gets angry, it's acknowledged that his sins are more numerous than his merits. So this tripartite collection of 4th century Persian rabbis, none of them are happy, and they all bring biblical proof texts to back up their assertions with regards to valuing anger. And we also have Pesachim here, Reish Lakish, who's in the 3rd century. He says any person who becomes angry, if he's a Torah scholar, his wisdom departs from him, and prophecy departs. Okay. Anybody want to read the Shabbat 105b text? Any takers? Everybody's fine with my voice? I'm speaking a lot. Yeah, people are cool with it? All right. So we have, it was taught in a Breita, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says from the name of Chilfa bar Agra, who said from the name of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, that's a lot. One who rends his garments in anger, or breaks his vessels in anger, or scatters his money in anger, or should be like an idol worshiper in your eyes, as that is the craft of the evil inclination. Today it tells him to do this, and tomorrow it tells him to do that, until eventually it tells him to go worship idols, and he goes and worships idols. So this text, by the way, I think is I know I talked about the anger in the other rabbinic text, but this text is like a really great connection to what we just saw in the script from Yoda, right? Because you have the anger here taking you to the dark side that could then direct you to do something that you don't really want to be doing. So I think this text actually really nicely connects with what Yoda's saying as far as the connection between anger and the dark side. Thoughts? I was really happy about this text. It's a cool connection. And of course, we have one other from Pesachim, Rabbi Mani Bar Patish, and whoever becomes angry, even if greatness has been apportioned to him from heaven, he's lowered from that status. Okay, great. Oh man, I did not know what to do with the seeing the future or elsewhere text. This is a really fascinating thing that Yoda says of concentrating, feeling the force flow. Yes, good, calm, yes. And then basically you can see other places, the future, the past, old friends who have died. I didn't have a good rabbinic text for this. I want to say that there's somewhere in rabbinic literature about seeing what came before, what will come, and all these other things, but yet it's not really part of it. It certainly doesn't fit into sort of regular rabbinic notions of what's cool, and they're not okay with it, which is like this interesting like sort of friction point between sort of tapping into the force and like sort of rabbinic notions.
What do you mean by they're not okay with it?
The rabbis not being okay with it.
Not being okay with what exactly?
So the rabbis, I mean, actually I'm gonna step back into the rabbis. I'm gonna jump out of the rabbis, which is when it comes to prophecy. So yes, during biblical times, the prophets definitely were able to see the future. So that's a good piece, and somehow that is a sort of a connection, a nexus point between here we see Yoda's articulation of the power of the force, as long as one's able to tap. And so you can say, okay, well, maybe like in the biblical era, people were able to tap into God and then able to see into the future. When it comes to the rabbis, they're not as keen on this anymore. They already have this notion that prophecy is not part of their world anymore. And so it's kind of sketchy to think about what was to be. Does that help, Jacob?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. So actually, that was a good question because I was just totally rabbinically focused, but I forgot about the biblical context, which is like, wait a second, prophecy is tapping somehow into God. So that was actually good. Thank you, Jacob.
You're welcome.
All right. Okay, so this is an interesting one. We got a little Millennium Falcon reference here. Anybody want to take this? Jason?
Oh, yeah, I can do it.
Awesome.
Good things. Lando Calrissian, you know, that ship saved my life quite a few times. She's the fastest hunk of junk in the galaxy. Should I keep going?
Yeah,
Three matters give a person comfort, and they are a beautiful abode, a beautiful wife, and a beautiful vessel, and beautiful vessels.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. So this is also from the Babylonian Talmud, and this text comes from, who knows, maybe the 2nd or 3rd century of the Common Era. And I was picking out the Kalim Na'im as far as the, that they didn't have, they had boats in rabbinic times, so they could talk about having a good boat, having a good ship, but not as far here. Really, when they say Kalim Na'im in the Talmudic context, it's really talking about like you have a good chair, you have a good jug or whatever it is. But I'm taking it to be a lot more broadly, which is that having good things is providing this. It's fascinating because the English translation here says giving a person comfort, but in the Hebrew it's marchivin dato shel adam, which is like it's mind expanding. Sort of expands. It allows more breathing room for yourself. I don't know how many people are going to necessarily talk about if the Star Wars and Judaism connections and talking about the Millennium Falcon, but I really like this textual connection here. All right.
I think it's easy
This
to
one's
see it as
really
a
cool.
home,
I'm
too.
excited about this.
I mean, it's very much at home to the people who are in it, and it like carries them in those things. So I definitely think in that home aspect, that abode aspect, it really fits in there.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, you're right. You're right. That is like their abode. You're right. Good call, Daryl. All right. All right. We don't even have to go to the Kaleen part. We can go to the Dira part. We can go to the abode. That's great. Great catch, Daryl. All right. So this one's really cool. This training/study versus action. Anybody want to take this one?
I'll go. Luke, you must complete the training. I can't keep the vision out of my head. And my friends, I've got to help them. You must not go. Hannah and Leah will die if I don't.
All right. Thank you. Do you want to keep going? Read the Kedushin piece?
Sure.
All right.
And there already was an incident in which Rabbi Tarfon and the elders were reclining in the loft of the house of Nitzah in Lod, when this question was asked of them: is study greater or is action greater? Rabbi Tarfon answered and said, action is greater. Rabbi Akiva answered and said, study is greater. Everybody answered and said, study is greater, but not as an independent value. Rather, it is greater as study leads to action.
Awesome. Thank you. So I found this tension here when Luke is pulled, like Yoda saying, you need to keep your study up. And Luke says, wait a second, I feel my friends reaching out to me. They're in danger. I need to go. And it's such a fascinating tension. And I'm going to pause right now. Does anybody know, roughly, does anybody have any sense of how long Luke stayed studying on Dagobah with Yoda?
A few months or something?
Okay.
Can he go back after he got his arm chopped off?
That's yes, but between arriving on Dagobah and then going off to Bespin.
Isn't it
Was
like
it really 3 months?
or something?
What, Allison?
18 months, like a year and a half.
What?
I think it's canonically, it's like really, really short. It's like a couple of weeks or something. I always just think of it as several months.
It really feels like a couple of days when you watch the movie.
It's actually really
Ellie, how long is Luke with Yoda on Dagobah? Never mind, he doesn't know.
I would say like 5 days max.
Is
So-
like time traveling in the same speed for like Han and Leia as it is for Luke and Yoda on Dagobah?
So what's really fascinating is the Millennium Falcon's hyperdrive was busted, if people remember. So the Millennium Falcon could not travel in hyperspeed. So they had to sort of like, plunk along or whatever it is. So I've heard anywhere between 1 and 3 weeks. So it could be as little as 5 days. It could be closer to 15 to 20 days. So I haven't, that's as far as I know. Gronowitz, do you have anything? Do you know anything? No? All right. So, but yeah, it's a bit of time. It's definitely a chunk of time. In any event, I'm really fascinated by this Babylonian Talmud text, this Kedushin text, because obviously for the connection to Star Wars, it's really interesting of like, how does Luke's, this being pulled in the tension to one direction, how does that play here? For the rabbis, it's really cool that ultimately they agreed to Rabbi Tarfon, which is to say that action ultimately, like performance of mitzvot, that's ultimately what's to be more highly valued. Yet at the same time, if you don't know how to perform the mitzvot, what good is it? But also at the same time, you can't just spend all your days studying. Like you ultimately have to go out and perform those mitzvot and go do those mitzvot. Any thoughts, questions, queries on that?
Yeah, I kind of had one on like, I feel like it kind of links to like the patience too, where it's like they already kind of forced him to train, and now it's like, how patient do you want me to be? Like that you don't want me to save my friends who are gonna die? Like, can I please go?
Yeah. I mean, that's good connection. That Luke's lacking patience. He wants to go help too. But that's, I mean, it was really old Ben is steering him to Dagobah, right? Initially in Hoth, and then even here with one of the earlier interactions with Yoda. He's like, what am I doing here with this little weird green creature? And old Ben's like, no, chill out. Like, you got to have patience. You're just like your dad. And so ultimately, Luke does fly off in his X-Wing towards Bespin, but he continues to learn his lessons.
I wonder if also, though, Can I say
Yeah,
something?
go for it, Farrah.
I wonder if also though, like I've been thinking about this, like connecting back to the like make yourself a teacher. Like Luke hasn't totally bought in that Yoda being his teacher. I feel like this whole part of Dagobah, right? Like so Ben is his teacher, and he, wants to listen to Ben and all that, but he really hasn't like acquired for himself Yoda as a teacher until later on, like later on after he goes and all this stuff. And then when he goes back to Dagobah, I feel like that's when he really acquires Yoda as his own teacher, So like, right, I think all of this really connects back together. He's like, no, you're not teaching me in a style that works for me. So like, I'm leaving. And then eventually like, okay, now I need to go back and finish.
Although some of it is in the style that he needs to learn, but also he wasn't necessarily ready, maybe. Right. I also, it's also interesting hearing what you said, because it makes it as not totally a binary, either like making a teacher or not. Like, it sounds like Luke was still in the process of making Yoda his teacher.
Right. But he really he still, at least Ben was like really his teacher. So he was like, I like want to do what Ben wants, right? That's why I'm going to even deal with Yoda in the first place. But he's still sort of on the fence about it.
Right. Which is crazy because he knew him for like a day. Oh man. And yet Yoda, he's around for weeks and he doesn't care. I know that's just the weirdest thing when you actually think about the relationship between Luke and old Ben. Like, Luke doesn't really even know him. Yet he's.
I think it's that Ben knew his father though, right? And what Luke really wants is for Ben to be his father. But Ben is like the closest that he could be to his father, really.
Yeah.
Never thought of it that way, actually.
We might not see because
definitely as a mentor, but like not as a father.
Right. Although he knew his father, right? He's like, you fought with my father in the Clone Wars? Like, I thought my dad was just he just drove ships around or whatever. What was that, Daryl?
I was saying that he does know Ben, like he has some history with him. He doesn't know him probably very well, but he knows of him. He's been around him. He's seen him. There is a little more foundation there in the history, even though they're not close until this point. He was kind of established in Luke's life as this person on far from some point early in his childhood. Maybe we'll see more of that in the TV show coming out.
Yeah. But you're right. He was at least familiar that old Ben was out there. He didn't know much about him. He didn't have such a great connection with old Ben. Right. All right. So now we get to my T-shirt, which none of you can see, but I'll try to show you. There we go. We got Vader. It says, "I am your father." I don't want to break my computer. But anyways, so I can't say that I'm going to do this for every session wearing a T-shirt with a line of dialogue from the movie we're discussing, but for this one I can say that I am. All right. Who wants to take this honoring parents, the Vader dialogue here? Stevie. Stevie, you want to take it?
Sure.
All right.
There is no escape. Don't make me destroy you. You do not yet realize your potential, your importance. You've only begun to discover your power. Join me, and I will complete your training. With our combined strength, we can end the destructive conflict and bring order to the galaxy. I'll never join you. If you only knew the power of the dark side. Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. He told me enough. He told me you killed him. No, I am your father.
All right. So we obviously have, when I say obvious, but we have also in the 10 Commandments, honor your father and your mother, right here from Exodus 20. And then it also gets later in Deuteronomy, it becomes fear, right? Fear your parents. So we do have, again, fear popping up again. But so there is that, like, why doesn't he just respect and honor his father? And yet there is a little bit in the rabbis when it comes to, wait a second, is like, how much do you really have to honor him and like listen to everything your parents say? And so there is a little bit of a pushback, as we see in this text from the Babylonian Talmud. This is a late second century text. It's a Baraita. Does anybody want to take this Yevamot 5b text? Anybody? All right.
As it is taught, one might have thought that honoring one's father and mother overrides Shabbat. You are to learn to say, you shall fear every man, his mother, and his father, and you shall keep my Shabbatot. I am the Lord your God. All of you, both parent and child, are obligated in my honor.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacob. So here we see that it's not that this, basically there are exceptions that if it's, if your parents say don't observe Shabbat, then you really should be observing Shabbat, and maybe it's something you should listen to. And so I'm taking that in some direction as saying, well, join the dark side, go to the bad side. And Luke's saying, you know what, that's just not acceptable. That's morally transgressive for me, and I'm not going to do that, right? I mean, also, of course, the context is that Luke's just having this massive bomb drop, this truth bomb dropped on him. And his mind can't even handle the truth, as I would imagine. Like, what do you mean? You're my, I'm holding onto this weather vane. Like, what do you mean you're my father? So that's a little bit of a sort of the parental honoring thing, and how it's not 100%, that there are some exceptions when it comes, even in the rabbinic literature, about that. Okay, so anybody? Yeah, Daryl?
Is there any discussion in the literature about the person who raises you as a father, or the person who is a parent or teacher to you versus, because I mean, he's not around Darth Vader at all. And I don't know if there's anywhere that would engage that or not. But it would be interesting to see of someone who actually performs the role of father versus someone who doesn't.
Like Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, right?
Right, exactly. And someone who is, because obviously I think this is a situation where you would say the person who is the father is not a good person, is not to be honored. So is there anything that talks about are you being a father, or are you not, because of your actions, or even just being there, or anything like that?
It's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head if anybody knows, but I'm happy to continue to look into it.
My impression is that at least in pre-modern texts, there's no adoption type status, but there is in sort of the reverse, that in the commandment to have children or raise children, that being a teacher could count. Those sorts of opinions exist.
It's true. That is true, Stevie. Yeah. So there are certain sort of honor, I want to say codes, but things that you need to if when it comes to a teacher, or if you learn something, there are certain deferential practices you do need to employ. So yeah, Stevie points out, there's definitely some of that going on. But as far as someone raising you like a parent, not really, but it really it certainly comes up in the context of, can you lean at a Passover Seder if you're the student in front of your master? And it's the same sort of discursive context as a son in front of his father, right? So I think what Stevie points out, that's the closest sort of, parallel for that. All right, so I'm going to point out two other sort of texts from the movie. I don't really have anything else, which is this death mark thing we see on Hoth, where Han Solo says, well, I got to go. I have this price on my head. I need to pay Jabba the Hutt off. And General Regan said a death mark's not easy. That just felt like such a fascinating scene, and yet I would love to have a text that corresponds to that. So if anybody has anything on that, that'd be great. One other one, actually I'm going to say two other things. One is Yoda saying adventure, excitement, a Jedi craves not these things. You are reckless, right? Which that's such a cool line. I would love to find something that corresponds with that. And I'm going to throw one other thing in because I see Vera here, which is bounty hunting, right? Of course, we have that line in The Mandalorian, which is, bounty hunting is a complicated profession or whatever. I don't really, it's funny when it comes to bounty hunting, I don't think it existed back in the rabbinic times. I think it's more of a medieval thing that popped up. And now, by the way, just contemporary, not that it really matters for these things, but contemporarily, bounty hunting is not really that common in the world. It's mostly just America, mostly. A lot of countries don't have bounty hunting. It's just not a thing. But if anybody has any relevant text for those.
So sort of a little bit sideways, but when Moses goes to Pharaoh and says, we have to go for 3 days in the wilderness because God's going to smite us, and Pharaoh says, I won't let you go. So here the general saying, I will let you go because I don't want you to get smitten, so I'll let you go.
Interesting. Yeah.
Obviously, you have to interpret Moses as being truth-telling to make that connection work, whereas he could just be, but
yeah. Cool. All right. So I got 2 questions for everybody. One is any questions, comments, queries, concerns on what we discussed, and then a totally separate question, which is what feedback do you have from this time? Do you like the lessons we learned for the first time?
I like the slower. I like how we went slower. Definitely.
Yeah.
I think it helped.
Oh, good.
I think I'm a little biased, but I love Empire Strikes Back, so I think it related more to me. I mean, maybe not related, but like, I feel like I'm more engaged with that one because I still feel, I don't know if anyone has the same opinion, it's the best one in the series.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, what was it? Wednesday or Thursday was the 40th anniversary of ESB. So it's very timely.
That is true.
Yeah.
I was going to say
thoughts
too,
out there, anybody?
Kind of timely because tomorrow's Memorial Day, and then we have this whole discussion about war and what actually makes good about war and everything. And so, reading through the post beforehand, just kind of after discussing, it's like we have Vader who was willing to just murder outright in cold blood, probably because of a lot of anger that drove him to that point, as well as we saw. And then Yoda talks about the anger. We have this whole thread of anger and hate. And then mirroring that, you have the idea that this is a just war. The Empire is obviously bad. This is a pretty clear-cut war. But even in this, you have the message of Yoda saying, this isn't something that makes you great. Meaning a war, you're doing, you need to control this. And then I think that flows, like they obviously see that also in the texts. And so it's this idea that, yes, context makes just wars, but even in maybe a just war, it is still very important not to give into anger, not to give into hate. And I think that there's a parallel there. And that, I think, is really interesting lesson from today, and timely because of tomorrow.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. There is, I didn't bring this in at all, and maybe this could have been brought in last week, and I'm sure it's on some people's mind, is this notion of the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer HaTov in rabbinic literature, of the good inclination and then the evil inclination, sort of representing to some degree, the dark side and the Jedi side.
Luke in the cave. Yeah.
What?
Like Luke in the cave, like the
right. You could do. Oh, that would be interesting. One thing I didn't bring in is dreams. Right? Is how much that cave being in sort of like a dream cave. Right. And dreams, we could go in a whole different direction. That's a whole, at least 1 or 2, if not 3 session Zoom thing. You could talk about dreams just in the Torah, especially around Joseph. And then you could also, there's a whole section in Masechet Brachot in the Babylonian Talmud, all about dreams and interpretations. It's a really big piece there. Yeah, that's good.
You mentioned the death mark earlier.
Yeah.
And it brought to mind these Ari Miklat, like when someone murders someone and he has to run away before the family member catches him. So they have a death mark on their head until they get to the city.
That's good. I didn't think about it in those terms. That's good. Yeah, so for those who don't know, so in the Torah, it talks about if you accidentally, inadvertently killed somebody, maybe you're chopping wood and then the metal flies off and kills somebody. So technically, the family of the person who was accidentally killed has legal recourse to come and just kill you, in retributive justice. So what the Torah allows, in cases where it was an accidental sort of manslaughter or death or whatever, there are 3 cities set up inside, sort of west of the river, and then 3 east of the river, where people can go and find refuge, and they're not going to, once they set foot inside those cities, then those families cannot seek justice. Right. It's a good point, Deborah. That's a good close death mark, even though, yeah. Han Solo is obviously worried about the money that he owes Jabba the Hutt, but you're right. It's sort of the accidental death from the Torah getting right to the R.A. Miklat. It's good.
Does he pay it in the end?
Does he pay Jabba the Hutt? Ultimately, he doesn't, right? Because what? Someone want to say something? Ultimately, Han Solo doesn't. I mean, it all starts before A New Hope, right? He doesn't. He drops the load, and then Greedo comes after him, and then we see in the hangar that Jabba's like, I really need that money, and then ultimately Boba Fett catches up to him, and then he's sprung by Leia, sort of, but then on the skiff in the Dunes of Carcoon or whatever it's called. I know that I got that wrong. But anyways, when they're out in the desert, then eventually Jabba's killed. So Han never pays him back.
Right, but what does he do with that money that he gets from the rebels? Does he says he's going, but then he didn't go, and then like he turned around halfway. What happened?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Does he get, now I'm asking everybody else, does Han Solo get money from the rebellion that
he definitely does.
Yeah, I assume the little chart he's carrying at the end of New Hope with all of the boxes on it is money in those boxes, and then loads it up and takes off with his reward, and then comes back and then just sticks with the rebellion until we see him in Hoth. And so, yeah, what does he do with all of that? I mean, I assume he spends some of it on fixing up the ship and things, but he clearly doesn't seem to be that more well off or with new stuff later on. So, or maybe he
does he ever take off though? Like I just thought he just stayed with the rebellion until Empire Strikes Back.
No, he definitely leaves and comes back during the battle in A New Hope, right? He says, I'm leaving, right? He takes his money. He's like, got my reward. I'm leaving. And then while they're fighting,
comes right back.
Must have gone somewhere.
Yeah. There's a few years that happen. I really should know my canon better. I imagine this is something that's explored in the comics that have been coming out in the last 5 years. Allison, do you know anything about what happens in this time with Han?
I'm very much not an expert on this movie.
Okay. Or the comics? Have you been keeping up with the comics?
A little bit scattered. I'm not 100% sure. I think what was just said sounds right to me, but I don't know.
Yeah. All right.
He says he ran into a bounty hunter at Ord Mantell, right? But was that like a rebellion ran into one, or just like he ran into one?
He ran into one, and that's before Hoth. So yeah, I mean, Han's clearly going. He's not staying with the rebellion. It's funny because the comics I was kind of keeping up with for the 2015, 2016. I haven't kept up in the last few years, but yeah, Han goes out. I don't know how much he stays with Luke and Leia on their escapades. But as Stevie mentions, he does mention when he's on Hoth that there was that bounty hunter on Ord Mantell. So he's clearly out and about, and bounty hunters are still trying to get him. But going back to Jacob's question, honestly, as a Star Wars fan, I never thought about it. Like, he got the money at the end of New Hope. He should go out and pay Jabba. Wow. That makes him all the more of a scruffy-looking nerf herder.
Son of a Tusken Raider. So another question.
Yeah.
Yoda says that war does not make a warrior great.
Right.
Well, what does?
That's a great question.
I mean, we had the Picklappers version of what makes a person great. But what do you think would be Yoda's opinion of a great or person? That's
a good question, Jacob. I'm going to throw it back to everybody else. I honestly, off the top of my head, I'm not really sure. I imagine there's some self-control aspects to it. Do we have much? I'm asking the field here. Do we have much in the way in episodes 5 and 6? What we hear from Yoda, what makes one great? I would imagine it's the self-control stuff, right?
In tune with the Force, whatever that means, kind of like a at peace with the universe-ish thingy,
I think the at peace thing is the big one. I mean, I don't know that they have any specific references that we can really look at, but I think it would be very similar to the text, because it would be this being at peace and making sure that you have conquered yourself, like at the point where you can control your inner emotions, your inner anger, your inner fears, and let go of them. So maybe even not just control, but being able to just let go of all of that so that it doesn't matter to you to where it affects your behavior. I think that would probably be something he think would make you be great, but definitely an internal thing.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. I mean, we definitely see Yoda employing a lot of humility, especially when Luke meets him, right? Yoda's not like, he's not trying to say like, you should respect me. Like, even when Luke says, hey, I'm looking for a great Jedi. Oh, you know, so at least one thing we can say is humility.
To be fair, he is kind of crazy by then. I mean, he's been alone there for so long, and Dagobah is a dark planet, and like inherently dark. So he's kind of affected by it, right? Just like you have Shakti's apprentice in The Force Unleashed, right? She turns to the dark side because the planet is dark, right? And I find more examples throughout Legends. So he is kind of crazy, and he probably imagined Luke coming to him for years already, and you know he's just has fun with it, you know.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. He's probably having fun with him. That's good. Awesome. All right. So any other thoughts from the content? Any thoughts on the style? By the way, I do have one question, which I was thinking about. I know people liked how I had that meme and a couple of sort of visual things last time included in the Safaria stuff. Would it be helpful, because this time I did the screen sharing with the sources, would it be helpful if I maybe played certain clips, like would just preload on YouTube or whatever it is, and then just, hey, here's this little scene? Would that be helpful? Unnecessary?
I mean, I feel like we all know the scenes, because like if we wouldn't know the scenes, we wouldn't be here. You know, we're the kind of people who know the scenes. However, I don't know. I mean, how much more work is it for you, right? It's
right.
You know what I'm saying?
That's exactly what I was thinking. Like, wow, you know, people are going to see it 2357 times or whatever it is. Like, they're going to know the lines. So I was thinking the exact same. Like, if someone's seen it 3.5 times, maybe not. But
I mean,
23 or 78, you know.
I mean, I haven't watched the movies in like 10 years. I watched when I was a kid a couple of times, but I still remember it. It's just in my head, you know.
Yeah,
and also, like, I play the games and I'm in the universe, and I'm a very big fan of Wikipedia. So I may not have watched the movies, but I know all the memes and everything, you know.
That's great. That's great. I should try to stick some more memes in for next time. What was that, Daryl?
I feel like it might take too much time.
Yeah,
that's true. It's a little harder to move through it at a good pace.
That's true. That's true.
Does anybody play Star Wars: The Old Republic? Because I feel like there's very good story content in there. So just like if you guys play, maybe you could play some of the flashpoints and stories together.
But is a lot of that still canon or just legend now? Because I think a lot of it got, or did they keep that?
I mean, it definitely, when it came out, it was all canon. If it still is canon, maybe, I don't know, because it's still an up-to-date game. So I don't know. I could Google it now.
Threw so much stuff out when they took over. But I think, I mean, like, what is it, Kreia, right? Kreia?
Yeah.
Like, people will hold series on her and text and everything, because that was really interesting.
I saw some guy do like a 3-hour podcast on just that person.
All right, so here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna wrap things up. If people want to, Daryl, do you want to pop the Discord link if people want to? All right, so just for some context, so before I started this last week, there were just some random Zoom conversations, and we created a Discord. And so if people want to continue some of these conversations, and it doesn't even have to be Star Wars, we can talk about other random stuff. So that can keep the conversation going, sort of, if people want to keep doing that. And then I plan on doing Return of the Jedi next week. And if anybody has any idea suggestions, I was really thankful to Vera this past week for sending me stuff regarding war, and she even gave me an interesting source for next week as far as retrieving Carbonite Han. So if people have certain things, you're like, you should make sure you include such and such text. I'm like, oh yeah, or whatever it is. So feel free to reach out to me. And also, if you have friends who want to see this, who want to take part, you think might be interested in the nexus of Star Wars and the Jewish texts, holler. Any questions, comments? We good? Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. And may the force be with you.
I'm glad I remembered this week. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for
Awesome.
hosting. I'm gonna head out.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you,